And we are live. I'm delighted to be joined by two Yuris, Yuri Rashkin and Yuri Felshtinsky. We're not going to do a big rambling intro here. I think many of you will be aware of Yuri Felshtinsky's work, how he has been a thorn in the side, I think it's accurate to describe that, of the Putin regime for, more than a decade, much more than a decade, and has written some extraordinary books exposing the origins of Putin's regime, the origins in blood, violence, and terror. You'll also be aware of Yuri Rashkin and the weekly podcasts that we do together. And I'll launch with my first question, then Yuri, you can do your intro. I was looking up some of the interviews that you both have done, and 8 years ago, I think Yuri F came out with the prophetic phrase that Putin wants war. That's all he wants. 8 years ago. And of course, here we are. And that phrase is as relevant today as it was back then.
Well, which Yuri is replying, but let me start. I think the Putin came to power in 2000, as we all know, on behalf of the FSB. He held the position of director of the FSB before, then he was quickly moved to the position of prime minister and basically became the president, through manipulation of the Russian constitution, because Yeltsin resigned and he became active prime minister. And I would say that from the moment he became formally the president of Russia, it was clear that he came on behalf of the FSB as organization, as a structure, and he very quickly started to move to major political and government positions as FSB officers, and with no time they actually took control of the entire country. And for several years they were consolidating power, it's true, but then starting 2007, Putin declared basically the foreign objectives of the Russian state. And in simple words, this was the recreation or rebirth of the Soviet Union, but it became a very, very active and very, difficult political problem and program, which became the problem for the end of the world. It started with the invasion of Georgia, it's continued with invasion of Ukraine in 2014, in 2022, and it's never stopped since that moment. And Putin never stopped being the president on behalf of the FSB. So he became a president for life. And that's what we are dealing with now. And it seems to be that the war is very natural form of existence for both Putin and the FSB and the regime which is built in Russia. And without war, they probably would not have reason to exist. And that's why they're not interested in stopping the war.
Yuri, I'm thrilled to see you always, and I also feel that I have one of the books, but there's many more. This is really history of practically of KGB, FSB, all of the acronyms that they were under. From you're the author, and Vladimir Popov, also very knowledgeable FSB, experienced. Former, we know there's no such thing, agent, but the book title, of course, From Red Terror to Mafia State, and it's from 1917 through 2036. So you are, the historian here, and everything you say points to Trump being interested in maintaining good relations with Vladimir Putin. Yet I am hearing this conspiracy theory, what I would consider, from my Ukrainian viewers and listeners who suspect that Putin, when they were meeting in Alaska, actually poisoned Trump. And that's why Trump is having all his health problems is because this is an attack from Putin. Why do you think such conspiracy theories what could lead to such a thing appearing when it's clear that that seems contrary to everything that I've been saying, that you've been writing? It doesn't make sense, yet people wonder.
Well, for many years we hear similar series about Putin, that he is ill, that he is dying, that he is replaced actually with many other Putins, which are presented to us every time as real president. We even had many reports that Putin actually died. So I would not, as a historian, I would not pay attention to this at all. People incline to believe that something would happen to a person whom they do not like, and at the same time whom they cannot remove from the position. Usually this relates to dictators. And but unfortunately, this we never get this winning lottery ticket. I mean, it's not that Hitler would die a day before he started the war, or it's not that Stalin would die the day before he would start another wave of purges in the Soviet Union or invasion of another country. And it's not that Putin will die suddenly and the war will stop suddenly and everything will be great and nice. No, this is not going to happen. We are not going to get this lottery ticket. The reason why Trump, and I have to stress that Trump was always trying to see Putin without American side being present is an indication that they need to discuss something which is so secret and so personal that they do not really want this information, to become public, even for a very limited circle of American officials who, by law and by profession, have to be present during those meetings. This happened during Trump's first term, when again he was trying many times to talk to Putin, person to person. This is happening now in Alaska when they were together in the car, and we do not, of course, know whether they had, possibilities and options to meet again person to person without American representatives or translators being present. But this by itself is very unusual. This is not permitted by protocols, by foreign protocols of the United States of America. American president should not talk to a leader like Putin without American representatives or translators being present. And this by itself is a very troubling sign. I think from an interview with which Witkoff gave to CNN, we may conclude that they actually discussed the possibility of Russian invasion of Eastern Europe, because when Witkoff mentioned guarantees which Putin was given to Ukrainians, well, the main guarantee, of course, was the promise, just the word of Putin, that he would not proceed further with invasion if he gets certain territories of Ukraine. And at that moment, Putin also mentions that he promises not to invade any other countries. I mean, there are not too many countries which left for him to invade, because, he already took control of Belarus, which is not member of NATO. He basically is controlling the government of Georgia, which is not a member of NATO, and he has Russian troops in Moldova, in Transnistria. So the only countries which are left to invade are actually in Europe, are actually countries which are members of NATO. And this is a very troubling moment, because at this moment, Trump should reply that if he invades any other country, then he will, face the military compasses from NATO. But this was not said. This obviously was not said. In other words, Putin promised not to invade Eastern Europe, but Trump did not mention that the United States is part of NATO, and NATO would never allow him to invade one of NATO countries. I mean, this was said by Biden some years ago. This was not a very promising statement, because Biden said that, well, we will not allow Russia to take a single inch of NATO's territories. But number one, he forgot at that moment that Finland and Sweden were not part of NATO. And number two, this was a kind of permission to continue with an invasion of Ukraine. So, but at least Biden indicated that the United States will defend Europe, which those countries which are members of NATO. Trump is not doing this, and this is a very risky state.
And there's so many different questions that arise from that. I guess starting with this idea of Trump's illness. I mean, Occam's razor can be applied here. He is a very elderly man who is attending meetings, many of which he barely understands the contents of when it's with European leaders. I mean, Occam's razor states that he probably was simply exhausted. That's the simplest explanation for why he would need to disappear for a few days. The slightly more conspiratorial one, and I'd love for Yuri to sort of comment whether this is in the style of the Russian intelligence services. This was quite a convenient story. You know, we're used to him splurging, vomiting his nonsense onto social media every couple of minutes of every day of the week, and suddenly he's silent. And that just coincides with his deadlines. Is a new deadline expiring, and lo and behold, everyone forgot about that. The media barely covered the deadline whooshing past. They all focused on, is Trump dead? Are they sophisticated enough to mount such an information operation, or is the simplest explanation still the best one to go after?
Well, let's start with understanding that Trump is the best American president Russia ever had in the last 25 years when Putin became president. So this is the best option for Russia. We know how Russia helped Trump to become president the first time. This assistance was crucial. I strongly believe that this was crucial for Trump, and without this assistance, he would not win. But the second time, he actually didn't need this kind of assistance. But it's not by chance Dmitry Medvedev, former president of Russia, published in Telegram a statement that indicated that they call Trump Colonel Daniil Fedorovich Trump. I mean, they actually consider him to be a Russian asset. So I doubt that Russia is interested in removing Trump from power. I would never buy it, and I would never believe in this. So we could speculate about Trump's health or about Putin's health, but Putin is the last person he wants Trump to go, because the important part is if we pay attention not to rhetoric and words, but to actions. And by the way, many people who actually support Trump or believe in Trump, every time Trump says something, unusual, calls not to pay attention to words, but to pay attention to actions. And actually, from 21st of January, when Trump became president, in the Ukrainian question, nothing changed. He stopped the assistance as soon as he became president, and that's the way it is now. He doesn't help Ukraine. He doesn't help Europe to stop the war in Europe, and he actually doesn't make Putin's life difficult. There is a lot of talking that he plans to make his life difficult because he doesn't want to stop the war in Ukraine. But nothing is done, and nothing is not going to be done. I mean, it's just people have this strange belief that, well, sooner or later Trump, would realize that Putin is lying to him, etc., etc., and that's when he would start to make Putin's life difficult. But Putin is not lying to him. I mean, Putin is not actually lying to anybody. He is not going to stop the war. He said it many, many, many times. He wants to stop the war if Ukrainians agree to capitulate. That's the only condition when
if Zelensky comes to Moscow. I mean, right. Of course, he'd have to be mad to do that.
He comes to Moscow, where he will put him in prison, something like this. This nothing is changing since 21st of January, and the only change was, I believe, happening in Europe, because Europe realized that the Americans are not going to help. I mean, everyone is pretending that they believe that Americans are going to help, but everyone knows that Americans are not going to help when Trump is in office, and who knows what will happen after. But so Europe is, going to finance this war. Europe is going to help Ukrainians because Europe has no choice. Because Europe knows quite well that as soon as Putin is done with Ukraine, he will move into Europe. And that's what's happening. Probably preparations for this happening right now, because in September, as we know, and September just started, they will plan to conduct military exercises, so-called, in Belarus. And we know that these exercises in 22 actually ended with invasion of Ukraine. So we are looking at the map every time, every day, checking whether Russian troops are there, how many Russian troops are there, and we are thinking, whether this might be preparations for invasion of Lithuania or for the second attempt to take Kiev. So we will see, of course, this. We will see what happens in September in Belarus. But September might be a very important month for the history of Europe.
And this is a question to both Yuris here. I mean, obviously, the media and even analysts are endlessly distracted by Trump's statements and his phrases and whatever, and that tends to distract from the underlying actions. the actions are starting to coalesce, and the lack of action. So, as you said, Yuri, there's no tangible action or even intent on Trump's part to sanction Russia further, and that's starting to drive a wedge between Europe and the Trump regime. Apparently, there was a bit of a shouting match earlier in the week on that very topic in the so-called Paris summit, where Witkoff walked out after just a few minutes after berating European partners. But the other actions we've seen, the significant one today, is the withdrawal of long-standing military training funds for the Baltic states. Now, as a Brit, I remember very well that the Falklands War, one of the key causes of that, actually, apart from the sort of long-term resentments and issues, territorial issues, was Britain withdrew its naval forces from the area because of cost cutting. That then gave the signal that we weren't serious about defending those territories. What I fear here is this same signal of a US withdrawal from Europe is a very visible sign that this territory will not be contested, will not be defended and supported by the US. And this could be the flag that Putin is looking for.
Maybe I'll jump in on this one the first, just to kind of give my take on the current context of what we're seeing. In a sense that I think we're looking at a country that lost trust. The trust we don't know if our president is alive. So when you lose trust on that very fundamental level, to have faith that people are going to trust in your military alliance and in your ability to back up your words with actions, when all we see is now Trump is planning on renaming Department of Defense into Department of War, which clearly will send a signal to anybody listening to this podcast, probably. And it does make me wonder about what we do with words, because Department of War, while we're discussing peacekeepers in Ukraine, knowing that those will be the people getting shot at first. So it kind of makes me wonder about that. And I feel like we are projecting weakness here from the United States point of view. This is very sad because we are leaving, while Putin, and that's something I wanted to ask Yuri about, is while Putin and Xi Jinping are discussing living to be 150 years old, again, American president has to show up to say that he is alive, and B, collect money for fundraising because he wants to get to heaven. So, I mean, which part is this? And I think that when, Jonathan, you brought up the withdrawal of funds from Baltic countries, it really makes me wonder what is the point for all these countries to pay 5% or anything, because those are the countries that are paying more and are counting on that first line of insurance against the Russian threat, and now that doesn't really work. What's the point? So I think that this is a destruction of NATO by other means, and once again just highlights need for an alliance, and that's where this coalition of 26 willing countries seems really intriguing and promising. But we'll see. Ramstein was like 54 or something, so this is a different size alliance, but maybe a better one that understands the Russian threat. So that's my take on that. Yuri.
Well, again, I think from the practical point of view, there is no NATO. I think everyone knows this in Europe. It's just politically slightly damaging to discuss this question, but I think no one believes that the United States of America will intervene into European war if Russia invades Lithuania in September of this year. I think everyone knows that Americans are not going to participate. Whether this was said openly to Putin during the Alaska meeting is a very interesting question. But I believe Putin knows that the United States of America is not going to help Europe if there is a war in Europe. So Putin knows this. I think we should listen to Chancellor of Germany, Mr. Merz, who said that the best guarantee which Ukraine could get is Ukrainian army. And I think this is a very honest and basically great statement, because the only army Europe has now is to fight against the Russian aggression is the Ukrainian army. I mean, there is no other army in Europe. Europe has great potentials. It's starting to arm itself. It's now realizes that Russia is a great danger, that Russian aggression is not going to be stopped by itself unless it's stopped by power. So I think in many ways, Putin is late with invasion of Europe, because Europe is very different now from Europe of 2014 or 22. But I do understand why Putin, is late. He was waiting for Trump. He was hoping that Trump would deliver to him capitulation of Ukraine. This did not happen. And now Putin has to change strategy and to think what to do with the invasion of Ukraine, because he is not able to take it. He is able to ruin it every day, and we see it happening. But he's not able to take it, right? So we will see again whether he will open the second front in Europe, because for him this might be a possibility to frighten Europe and to force Europe to stop the assistance of Ukraine. And Putin sincerely believes that the reason why he is not able to take Ukraine is because Americans were helping to Ukrainians to fight, and Europeans were helping Ukrainians to fight. So he believes that without this assistance, he would be able to take Ukraine very quickly. This is not so, but Putin doesn't know this. And I think that's what we are going to see, unfortunately, that the position of Russia since 21st of January did not change. The position of Ukraine since 21st of January did not change, because again, Ukrainians have no choice. They are not offered any form of peace. They are offered surrender, unconditional surrender, with understanding that Russia will occupy Ukraine, annex Ukraine, start to draft Ukrainians into Russian army, what is very important, because Ukrainians living in Ukraine, they have military experience now, and they were living for many years. If we start to calculate from 2014, for more than 10 years, they are living in the conditions of war. This is very important for Putin, to draft those people into the army. And then he plans, of course, to proceed with invasion of Europe. And for this, he is going to rely on the assistance of, North Korea is not very important, Iran is not very important, but China is very important. So this is going to be, from the Russian point of view, they're going to be helped by Chinese to take control of Europe, and then together with China, they finally will start the battle against the United States. This is a very, simple, logical, and great plan for Putin. So he has this program, and he understands that as long as he lives, he will deal with this, because it probably will take some time to take control of both Europe and the United States. But this is what they were planning to do. The interesting question is, of course, why Trump doesn't care. But it seems to be that he doesn't care, and it seems to be that a good half of Americans do not care about this as well. So this new reality, this which we are facing, new situation, and we are going to deal with it, and we will win at the end. I have no doubts. The question is how much time this victory will take, and how many lives are going to be lost in the process. But coming back to the Ukrainian issue, which is very important, because it seems to be that Putin's program actually could not realize and would not be realized because of Ukraine, right? That's why it's so important for Trump to deliver Ukraine to Putin. That's why it's so important for Putin to take Ukraine. But the question is, of course, an interesting question, which no one is asking. So, all right, Trump demands that Ukraine should capitulate and become whatever, part of Russian Federation. Great. Why? What the United States is gaining if Ukraine becomes part of Russia? I mean, why Trump is so interested in forcing Ukraine to capitulate? And this question is never asked. No, it's questions never asked. So the question is why, and I think the only logical answer is, and by the way, the renaming of Department of Defense and Department of War plays into this answer, that Trump is provoking Putin to start the war in Europe. And that's why he needs Putin to get Ukraine, because without Ukraine, Putin cannot proceed in Europe. So if, in addition, unless Putin is so lost with further, moves and steps, that he will take his chance and will open the second front and will invade Lithuania this September. We will see, of course. But that's what Trump is doing. He is provoking Putin to start the war, because he knows that the only way America could become great again, according to Trump, is if there is a war in Europe, the way it was, during the First World War and during the Second World War, and that's why Trump actually noticed for the first time, I guess, in his life, that the Second World War actually ended in Europe on 8th of May, because that's why he's renaming the Defense Department into War Department, because he needs a war in Europe. And in order to have this war in Europe, so Americans would sell weapons to Europeans for dozens of billions of dollars, and Trump
but not put their troops on the line this time.
Right.
Well, that's the idea.
Of course not. And by the way, this was said by Trump many times, that there will be no troops involved in any, future peace with Ukraine, blah, blah, blah. There will be no American troops. And by the way, even when we discuss Europeans' offer to have European troops in Ukraine, there is a very serious provision for this. It's that after the war is ended. I mean, no one is going to give Ukrainians troops, European troops, while there is a war in Ukraine. So the best guarantee Ukrainians are going to have is from its own army, as Chancellor of Germany said in Washington, D.C. Recently when they met together with President Zelensky and President Trump.
All right, then. I will. Let me put it this way. We have nonetheless president who is claiming to be alive or not, and all the things that are connected with that. And we have Putin and Xi that are discussing living to be 150 years old. How do you actually assess Putin's ability to live to be 150 years old? Do you feel that he has the resources needed, or is this more of a still work in progress?
Well, I think we have to consider the following. One of my books, which was published some years ago, in 2008, I believe, called The Corporation, Russia and KGB in the Age of President Putin. And there is a chapter which I call alternative biography, because there is a possibility, which is not really important, but there is a possibility that real mother of Putin was a different woman who lived in Georgia, and Putin actually his first several years of his life was living in Georgia, not in Russia. But the point is that the Vera Pavlovna Putina, which seems to be is his real biological mother, just died recently, and she was more than 100 years old. So, and as we know, Putin doesn't drink, Putin doesn't smoke, he's in good physical condition. So, number one, I mean, for any plans, I think we might consider that he would continue to live until he is like 100 plus years old. I think that this is a possibility. Number two, he promised to be a president until 2036. That's from this, the title of the last book. Well, actually not last book. The last one is about Trump. But he might change the law again, because he changed constitution in Russia in order to allow himself to be president until 2036. So he will stay in power. But what is more important, that I do not consider Putin a dictator, even now. When I look at Lukashenko, I do understand that this is a classical dictator. When I look at Putin, I understand that he rules Russia on behalf of the FSB, which is a very powerful institution. So in this sense, there is a collective Putin who is ruling Russia. And this Putin could be easily replaced with any other, high-ranking officer of the FSB. That's what will happen sooner or later, because sooner or later Putin, of course, will die or something happen to him, whatever. Well, in the end, he will die anyway. This we could be sure of. But I do not really believe that those people who are controlling Russia, and these are probably again people from the FSB, mainly the collegium of the FSB. This is an official structure which exists, and this is like Politburo of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, which ruled Russia for decades. So now we do not have Politburo, but we have a collegium of the FSB. This is an official structure, but this is a structure about which we know nothing. Literally nothing. We do not know what they discuss when they meet. We do not see any documents about those meetings published. I mean, this is a very secretive structure. And I'm sure that they will replace Putin without any difficulties. And again, what is important to understand that this is really the FSB, really is an institution which rules Russia. For the first time in history, we have state security who is ruling, the major country. For the first time in history, we have a system when instead of a budget, which state security usually, exists in all countries, which they get from the government. And in case of KGB, this was the huge budget, and the structure was huge. But this was the budget which they received from the Communist Party, and they had political control of the Communist Party. This was terrible political party, but nevertheless, this was a certain political control. And now, instead of budget, the FSB has in their disposal the entire economy of the Russian Federation. And there is no political control above the FSB, because the FSB is above everything. That's what we are dealing with. So it's a very different and dangerous structure. And that's why for many years people couldn't figure out what's actually happening in Russia, who is ruling Russia, what do those strange people want. Those strange people want very simple thing. They want to control entire world. It seems to be slightly over dramatic, but just slightly, because the same idea existed in 1917 when they had this, great idea to have world revolution. And they succeeded partially, right? Eastern Europe in Europe, Cuba in America, some African countries in Africa, and don't forget about Asia and China, where actually, because of China, the communists got major platform and position. So now Putin is going to be united with China in the struggle against the United States, which is the major enemy of the Russian Federation and China, the great state of China, as Trump would say. So this great state of China and this great state of Russia will unite their forces against the United States. But in order to do this, they first have to deal with Europe. And that's what we are seeing now.
And isn't this a little, I would say, delusional on the part of Putin? Because even some of the Z patriots after the Shanghai summit were bemoaning the idea that actually Russia has become simply an extractive economy, an extractive colony of China. China supplies it with munitions and war materials, manufactured, finished, high-tech goods. And Russia simply digs stuff up out of the ground and hands it over without any kind of value add. In this partnership for world domination, haven't they subsumed themselves as a sovereign economy to China? And ultimately, isn't China going to be the winner from this? Because China doesn't want to, I think, literally control or invade the world. They're quite happy to do it through a more sophisticated economic and investment type model. Do you think Russia has become a proxy, a pawn, or even a colony of China?
Well, everything what is said is correct. I mean, you cannot compare Russia and China. This is obvious. But Putin is a fascist. I mean, he's a Russian fascist. His roots are, from the Communist Party, of course. He was party member, as many other Russian officials before 1991. But he's a fascist. And as a good fascist, he believes in superiority of either whites or Russians, or maybe even Europeans. And he definitely understands that, all those Chinese, they could have all the economies they want, or all the money they want, but you cannot compete against Russians. Well, besides, Russia has more nuclear weapons, of course, than China, and it will take some time for China to level nuclear weapon situation with the Russian Federation. So I think that Putin sincerely believes that he will overplay China at the end, but at the very end, or maybe they will split the world. Like we will control Europe, they will control China, they will control Asia. So I think so far he's fine with selling to Chinese the idea of mutual fight against the United States. And I think this was sold. This was sold not even recently, but during the previous meeting of Xi and Putin, when, if you remember, he whispered something into his air, something like, well, what we've agreed on, we will deal with it for the next 100 years, something like this. So now it's 150 years, okay, fine. So this will take them longer. But again, the idea is that they have common enemy. This enemy for Russia is obviously Europe, first of all, and then the United States, as soon as Trump is not the president. And for China, the competitor is the United States, of course, but traditionally China never used troops except when they had this Chinese-Vietnamese war. And we will see whether China will still use the economy to take control of countries and the world. And maybe this is a plan which China has, to use Russia as the icebreaker and just, to take control of the United States, well, in certain way, or to win over the United States using economic tools. This is possible.
In that case, in the limited amount of time that we have today, and I want to thank everybody that joined us today and is contributing really great questions in the chat. Jonathan, I love your audience that I'm kind of tapping into here and seeing people are just, it's great. Really good to see that.
Good activity in there, isn't there? It's
For sure.
very engaged.
And we should mention this, that we have a donation here from John Doe, who says, thank you for your tireless efforts. It's a great round that is really exciting to listen to. It would be nice to give tips on what they can do themselves instead of waiting for the politicians. And everybody's welcome to incorporate it. I would just say, think critically, ask questions. If somebody says that Putin poisoned Trump and it doesn't make sense, use your brain. But my question is, Yuri, it seems like your popularity goes up and down depending on whether people are aware of the Russian threat. And how are you feeling right now as far as interest in Europe or elsewhere to your work? How are you seeing that happening?
Well, there are a lot of great books, published about Russia, and I do not expect really people to concentrate on reading my books. They're actually probably not the easiest reading for the reader, but I think by now Europeans do understand that, unfortunately for them, there is a great possibility that they will have to fight. Again, really to fight the way Ukrainians are fighting now against Russia. And I think this understanding is clear, especially in those countries which are very close to Russia, like Sweden, Finland, the Baltic states, Poland. Ukrainians, of course, are already fighting. And but I think it's also clear to great powers of Europe, like France, like Germany, like the Great Britain, that this war is inevitable. And at least that's how it seems to be that everybody is preparing for this war the way they are able to prepare itself, right? Everybody is increasing military budgets. This is happening. Everybody is preparing armies to fight. And the only way to avoid it, and that's how it was starting 2014, if we managed to stop Russia in Ukraine. And again, unfortunately, this was not done during all these years starting 2014. And there were so many limits put on Ukrainians to fight that even Trump noticed that you cannot win this war if you cannot actually fight against your enemy. But this was the conditions of both the United States and Europe until very recently. Then the United States, of course, under Trump, withdrew itself from helping Ukraine completely. And now, like yesterday, I guess, Europeans agreed that they should give Ukrainians long-range missiles to fight against Russia and to strike Russia. I mean, this is a shame that this takes so many years to come to a very primitive and obvious decision. And the premise of obvious decision is, number one, that you cannot stop Putin by being nice to Putin. So the only way to stop Putin is to create for him conditions when he is interested to stop the war. And I was mentioning this many times. I stayed for some time that I believe the easiest way to stop this war is to allow Ukrainians to strike against Moscow and to give them weapons to strike against Moscow. And it's for many people it sounds too radical or too cruel to strike against Moscow, but I have to say that number one, Russia has no difficulties to strike against Kyiv, and they do it like literally every day. And number two, and this is a philosophical issue, Russia is a huge country, but this is a country of one city. And unless something is happening in Moscow, no one pays attention to this. And so in Moscow, you have not just 10% of population of the entire country, but you have literally 90% of the entire major businesses in Moscow, etc., etc., etc. All cultural life is in Moscow. Everything is concentrated in Moscow. And when you talk to people from Moscow, they do not know that there is a war going on. They just do not know this, because this is a war happening somewhere far away, mainly in Ukraine, because until recently, Ukrainians were not allowed to strike against the territory of the Russian Federation using Western weapons, including rifles. So it was just recently Ukrainians started to strike against the territory of Russia.
Well,
And
this may be today's. Let's see. Yes, this is supposedly footage from today, Moscow City. So perhaps somebody's taking your advice to heart.
well, I sincerely hope so, because I think that if Moscow is attacked, if Moscow is feeling the war, this war will be ended in 2 weeks. So I would not promise you to end this war in 24 hours like Trump did. But I promise you that if the war is under heavy attacks, then we will see peace talks in 2 weeks. And then we will see what's going to happen. If Ukrainians might lose the control of some territories for now, and this is, I guess, might be expected. But they will be Ukrainians sooner or later. You know, it's the next time the Russian Federation collapses, and this time will come. We do not know when, but it will come. The Ukrainians will get back their territories. So, but in order to to be in this position, they to survive this war as a state. They need to survive this war as a station. They are doing actually great, despite all those troubles through which they are going, and they will get back all their territories. They will get it back the way the Baltic states received their independence after 50 years of occupation. I mean, they will get it back as soon as they believe in the state. And again, when Estonians, Lithuanians, Latvians, they actually started the process of destruction of the USSR. They were the first nations which raised the issue of independence, because they never forgot that they independent state, even when they were under occupation. So Putin is not able to win this war. There is no way he will win this war. The problem is that it cost a lot of lives for Ukrainians to hold, right? But they will win. Eventually, they will win, and Europe will win over the fight with the United States, against Russia, and Americans after Trump will win in their confrontation against China and Russia. Just because no one actually wants to live in those countries, you see. That's why Putin is so much interested in ruining all those territories, because he knows deep inside that Russians do not want to live in Russia, and Chinese do not want to live in China under the communist regime. And somehow everybody wants to live in Europe, where people have freedom. So that's how it is. That's why it's important to destroy freedom, because as long as those countries have freedom, your own population wants to move there. And by the way, a lot of Russians moved there. We know this, and a lot of Chinese moved out of China as well. So they know this, and they have this competition actually. Is for freedom, not for money, and not for economy or controlling economy, but for freedom. And if they destroy freedom, they would manage to control the world. But if we manage to hold our freedom, to keep our freedom, they have no chance to win.
Well, we need to catch up, I think, as Zapad unfolds. That's the exercise in Belarus and the Baltics. And we need to watch to see if Europe can get its act together and not wait for a kind of consensus with the US that is never going to come. Yuri, and we should, or both Yuris, we should definitely do this again, as I feel that events are going to unfold dramatically between now and the end of the year.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Yuri. Thank you to all our listeners.
And invitation. Hope to see you.